Welcome to Conversations in Social Care, a unique and refreshing podcast for the social care sector, brought to you from Care Talk. It's fantastic to welcome the Chief Executive of Care England, and I'm delighted to say it, a fellow Geordie as well, Professor Martin Green. Good morning, Martin.
Hello there, Steve. Hi.
Now, not many people know that you're actually originally a Northeasterner. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I come from Northumberland and I have such happy memories of my life at home. It was a really great place to grow up, and I always look forward to returning as well.
Yeah, once you're from the Northeast, it always stays in you, doesn't it?
It does, very much so.
And of course, because of your work, Martin, it has taken you to have to sort of live in London because a lot of your meetings are based down there. Would you say growing up in Northumberland sort of shaped your values in terms of your career?
Yeah, I think it did very much so. I think, I was lucky to be brought up in a very kind and loving family. I also went to a great school, King Edward's, and one of the things that I did when I was there, I did some work, what might now be called befriending, but it's really about visiting a really interesting place, which is called Merley Croft, and at the time it was a home for people with disabilities. And one of the things that really taught me, I got quite friendly with a young guy who'd had a very serious motor accident and he was paralyzed from the neck down. And at first I was very wary of going into that situation. But in fact, I began to realize he was a really nice guy and he was just like anybody else. But unfortunately, he'd had this terrible accident which had changed his life. And that taught me as well that people often have situations which they can't control. But all of us need to be mindful of that and support people.
And you never forget an experience like that, do you?
No, you certainly don't. I remember that guy now to this day. And what was so sad, he had so many things that he wanted to do in his life. He was only in his sort of late 20s. And then all his life changed because of that accident. But he was a really great guy. And I do remember that as I got to know him, I began to see him as a person, not somebody with disabilities.
Yeah. Now, of course, Martin, both your parents were in receipt of care services. What was your own personal experience and what did you take from this?
Well, I think, at the end of their life, they both went into care homes because of ill health. And I think one of the things I took from it was how important it was for the care home to really understand the types of people they were and how to support them in ways that were very much in keeping with the way in which they lived their lives. I think I also learned how important good care was, not only for my parents, but also for me, because I had all this worry taken away from me and I knew they were being well looked after. And they also felt very safe and secure in those care homes. So, I think it was a good experience that we had, even in a very difficult situation when ill health meant that they couldn't live in their own home anymore.
Yeah. Now, of course, Martin, you've had an extensive career in NGO development nationally and internationally. How has working abroad influenced you?
Well, I think one of the takeaways I have from working overseas, and particularly from my time in Uganda, was that you have to be really creative because there are not all the resources that we have available here. And so you had to really think outside the box. And I think one of the things that made me a little bit irritated when I got back was that people were always talking about the fact that there was a lack of resources, etc. But, where I had been, there were no support networks, no resources. In fact, sometimes as well, people were having to fight against prejudice as well as lack of resources. So I do think one of the things I learned was to be as creative as possible, and also that wherever you are in the world, people are people. And I really took that message away as well.
Yeah, again, a great experience.
A fantastic experience. I think it was really one of the pivotal experiences in my life, and it was really much out of my comfort zone, but it was extremely challenging, but very enjoyable. And I look back on it with so much happy memories.
Excellent. Now, you're a former trustee of the National AIDS Trust, of course, Martin, and there has been comparisons between the AIDS epidemic versus the amount of media coverage that the coronavirus has received in comparison. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I think one of the challenges of the AIDS pandemic at the start of it was the prejudice. And I don't think we saw that to the same extent with the coronavirus. I also think because the HIV and AIDS pandemic identified with one particular community, there was a potential for it to just be seen as a problem for that community and not for the rest of society. Of course, as time went on, we began to realize that it was everybody's challenge. I think the coronavirus situation also was different in that it arrived very quickly, and we didn't really have that time to get ourselves adjusted to what might be the implications of it. So I think they were very different pandemics, but I think there are lessons that can be learned from all of them. And one of the things that I think I take away from the HIV AIDS pandemic and the way in which that was first of all dealt with was that people didn't see it as their problem. Now, in the coronavirus pandemic, I think also older people were very much in that space. So at the start of this pandemic, we saw the NHS withdrawing from care homes, and we saw this very much seen as something that was killing older people. Of course, as time went on, we began to realize the severity of the coronavirus pandemic, and it was the fact that it was having an impact on everybody's life. And so to that extent, there was a bit of similarity, I think.
Yeah. Now, of course, during the COVID pandemic, Martin, we've all had highs and lows. I was just wondering what yours have been personally.
Well, I think my lows have been when I got COVID and I wasn't expecting to be so ill for so long. And it made me realize how incredibly difficult it is dealing with something like that when you feel very low in yourself, and also when you just wonder when the end of it will come. And it made me realize for people with long-term conditions, that is going to be their life, and it will be their life every day, and there will be no thought of recovery. So I think that was my low point. I think my high points have been the amazing contribution people have made and how people have supported one another. And I particularly want to say, Steve, what a fantastic job the social care workforce have done. You know, they have been true heroes of this pandemic. They were on the front line of it when nobody realized they were on the front line of it. They were showing so much commitment when they were being, in effect, ignored by a lot of the rest of the system. And what has come out of it for me is that there has finally been a recognition for just how amazing and professional the social care workforce is. And so I think we've got to build on that in the future.
I always feel personally, Martin, it's a shame it took a pandemic for people to realise just how good people are in social care.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it really has taken us all through this pandemic to understand that we all need people, and particularly in social care, the importance of the people who work directly with those who need support. And also, I think the other thing that came about from this pandemic was a recognition that people who work in social care really connect with the people they support. And so those who died in social care, it really had an impact on the staff because they were friends as well as people they supported. And so I think that has really come through in this tragedy.
Yes, indeed. With the previous crisis in social care, of course, Martin, during the economic downturn, I think we failed to learn lessons ultimately. How's coming out of this current crisis? Can we ensure that lessons are learned and make a lasting change for good?
Well, I think we've got to use this pandemic as our platform for real change. So I think one of the things that's really come out of this pandemic is a recognition that health and social care are completely interdependent, and they are two sides of the same coin. So one of the things that I want to come out of this is a real recognition of that and better integration of health and social care. I think also we've really seen the commitment to staff. So one of the things that I want to see that commitment rewarded. So I think we need some clear skills and competencies frameworks. We need some transferable qualifications that will enable staff to be able to move between different care providers, or indeed care providers in the NHS. And we need to have much better pay and conditions and salaries for people in social care. And because of what they've done during this pandemic, I think finally their contribution is being recognised, and we must not let this slip back to where it was.
Definitely. Now, you hold the role of independent sector dementia champion for the Department of Health. COVID has hit people obviously living with dementia quite hard and their families. Coming out of COVID, what are the main challenges, would you say, going forward?
Well, again, I think one of the things that's been really shown is the importance of the connection between the people living with dementia and their carers. And one thing I think we need to underline is that even if somebody living with dementia is living in a care home, their most important relationships will be with the people they love and the families that they have in the community. So I think the pandemic showed that that connection is really important, because when we saw people not able to have that physical contact with their relatives, it had an impact on the person living with dementia, but it also had an impact on families. So I think that's something we must hold on to. And I think also that that means that in the reform agenda, we've not only got to look at social care, we've not only got to look at the funding and how it's structured, how the staff are rewarded, but an absolute essential element of that reform agenda has got to be about how we support carers, how we ensure that carers are supported to be able to support the person they love. So I think that's come out of the pandemic, and that recognition around particularly the support people give to people living with dementia is really important.
I think that question's come around a lot, Martin, during the pandemic. Who cares for the carers?
Yeah, I think it has, Steve. And again, something else that we need to focus on as we move out of this, and as we build back better and stronger, we've got to acknowledge the contribution of family carers and make sure they're properly supported, both financially, but also with a range of other supports like respite support, etc.
And of course, Martin, you're involved with so many things. Among other things, you're also a trustee of Independent Age. There's a massive role, obviously, for older people to play in a caring society, especially around volunteering. How can the sector promote the role of volunteers in social care?
I'm really pleased you asked that question, because I think volunteers can really add value to social care, and also older people particularly love to have a purpose and something to be able to focus on. And we've got a really big pool of talent in people in the community who are older, who've got loads of skills, and they would like to apply those to social care. So I think we've just got to make it more open. We've got to really welcome volunteers. We've got to encourage volunteers to come in to do specific things. Some of them will be about caring, but some of them might be about some support functions as well. And I think what that will do, it will enrich the life of the volunteer, and it will certainly enrich the life of the person in a care service. And it will also provide support to care providers. So I think it's a win-win all round, really.
Yeah. Now, of course, you've got up close and personal with Whitehall and Downing Street over the years, Martin. Are there any particular experiences that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think some of the experiences I've had with politicians and indeed senior civil servants, the light bulb moment is always when you present them not with a policy, but with some practical way in which something changing will completely transform and improve a person's life. And when you get down to personal stories, that's when both politicians and senior civil servants connect. And I think we should remind ourselves that however grand you are, however many titles you have, however many roles you have, actually we're all people, and it's about a person-to-person story that makes the biggest impact. And I've seen that very clearly demonstrated when I've been working with everybody in Whitehall, whether it's in the Department of Health and Social Care, or indeed in the Prime Minister's office, or indeed the Treasury.
And I was going to ask, Martin, obviously, as CEO of Care England, what are your own personal values, and how do you ensure that these are carried forward to all your members?
Well, I think one of my personal values is about the issues around dignity and respect. And I think that translates in many ways. So, for example, I think it's about understanding the person and ensuring that care services respond to the person's needs, but also recognise the person's abilities. And one of the shortfalls, I think, in social care in the past has been we've always worked on what people can't do. And we now need to shift this agenda to supporting people to be able to live with their assets rather than thinking about their deficits. Now, in terms of the value base of Care England, the value base of Care England is very aligned to those issues about respect, dignity, choice, control. And I think the Care England members really try and exhibit that in the work that they do. It's never an exact science. It's never something that you always get right. But I really feel that Care England members are striving as hard as they possibly can to deliver high quality, personalised services to the people they support.
Yeah. Now, recruitment obviously has been an issue for the sector for quite a while now. During COVID, there's been an increase of applications from other walks of life. How do we ensure boosting staff levels to maintain the shortfall, both now and in the future?
Well, it's my view we've got to, first of all, make this a very attractive place to work. So all the things I said about developing career pathways will really help to establish social care as a profession where there is a clear career pathway and where people can come into the sector and make good quality careers. I think what we should also do is recognise that people in, for example, retail, hospitality, they have a lot of transferable skills. And as the economy changes after COVID, there will be a lot of those people looking for new opportunities. And what we've got to do is connect them to the social care services, but also we've got to say, we will recruit on values, we will train you to develop your skills, but we recognise as well that a lot of people have got very transferable skills. So in many ways, we have a good opportunity post-COVID to solve some of our problems around recruitment. But of course, it must also be accompanied by a proper funding settlement that will enable us to pay people as professionals and to acknowledge and reward their amazing contribution.
Yes, of course. Now, one of the good things to come out of COVID is the increased awareness and appreciative care workers, as we said before. How do we maintain this shift in value of the workforce?
I think one of the things we've got to do is keep sending out those stories about how important social care is and get those messages into the front of the general public, as well as politicians and policymakers. Because what did come out from COVID was people understanding, probably for the first time, just how complex social care work was, but also how incredibly dedicated social care staff are. And those were because of the stories that came out around staff who, for example, stayed in a care home for sometimes several weeks in order to make sure they weren't an infection risk for their residents, etc. That level of commitment was absolutely outstanding, and people recognise that. And what we've got to do is build on that recognition and make sure that it doesn't fade into the background, that it stays centre stage. And certainly Care England will do a lot of that.
And of course, the age-old question, Martin, how do we achieve long overdue reform of the care sector once and for all?
Well, the first thing I think we've got to do is have a really new vision for social care. Too often we have talked about the money before we've talked about what we're trying to achieve and what the vision for social care is. I think our new vision for social care should be about working on people's assets, not their deficits. It should be about downstreaming the preventative agenda so that we are looking at how social care can support people not to go into crisis, but also how to live well. And if we do all those things and we get the vision right, we will then be able to work backwards and say, how much will this cost? What will make it a sustainable sector? How can we make it attractive to inward investment? And one of the things that I get very annoyed about is that I'm often in situations, particularly in the media, where they sneer at me because some of our members have got investment from other sources. Well, investment is a good thing, and we need more investment in the care sector. And I have to tell you, post-COVID, we will be pitbulling for as much investment as we can get, and we'll be competing on a global scale. So I think this notion that we should always downplay investment and how important it is, we need to move away from that, and we need to recognise the important contribution inward investment makes to the quality of care and to the lives of the people who are supported in care services.
Definitely. Now, of course, Care Talk have organised a conference, Martin, for the 30th of June at the Mermaid, and the lineup of speakers is incredible. It really is a who's who of care, including Sir Simon Stevens, the CEO of the NHS, yourself, of course, and other people will be speaking. Do you think that through COVID, that this will happen, that bringing in health, that there will be massive reform?
Well, I think there will be reform, and also I want to pay tribute to the lineup they've got at these conferences. They are absolutely fantastic. And I know from previous years that these conferences are really important events. And not only are they important because of the speakers that are attracted to them, but they're also important because of the networking that goes on throughout the conference. So I really think these are events that people shouldn't miss. And I always make sure that I attend them. And I'm really pleased to be speaking. And when I see the speaker lineup, I'm particularly honoured to be speaking, actually.
Yeah, the speaker lineup's absolutely incredible, isn't it? Like I said, it's a who's who of care.
It certainly is, but also it's not only a who's who of care, it's a who's who of health. And you've got politicians there, you've got senior figures like Sir Simon Stevens. It really is an amazing moment because we talk about integration. Well, at this conference, we will have people from both bits of the health and the social care sector, and they will be talking as well about the future. And that's another important aspect of this conference. We can all go through the post-mortem about the past, and that has its value. But let's put our mind and our eyes to the horizon, and let's think about what we can do in the future to make things better. And I think this conference is going to be absolutely a pivotal moment in achieving that.
And of course, Martin, many people will have seen you on TV over the last year or so. You've never really been off TV. You're always asked to speak, obviously, because of your in-depth knowledge and being the CEO of Care England. How have you coped with that, the constant demands for media attention?
Well, it can get very draining, but it's really important to remember that it goes with the territory in a job like mine. And it's also important to acknowledge that, you know, all of us in social care need to be out there and saying what the issues are and giving the message clearly, not only to people in power, but also to the general public. And I've been supported in the things I've said. You know, many of my colleagues in other associations have said exactly the same thing. And one of the things that's been great about this, as we've all been in front of our television cameras, there might be several of us, but the message is absolutely the same. And that's been really great to see. And it's also been a message which says, we want to look to the future and we want to come out of this stronger than we went into it.
I have to say your passion for social care shines through. I've known you for about 12 or 13 years now through hosting the Great British Care Awards, and you're so passionate and believe so strongly for care. You're a great champion for it, I have to say. Now, coming out of COVID, one of the first things, of course, I think we all want to do, we touched on it before we came on air, Martin, was obviously have a few wines, have a few drinks, get together with a few people. If you had a celebratory party after this, who would you invite and why?
Well, do you know what I would do? I would invite the friends I have, both in the sector and outside the sector, but I'd focus on the ones who enjoy a good party. I'd focus on the ones who are positive rather than the ones who might be picking over the corpse of what happened. And I think, again, you know, with that eye to the future, I think we should remind ourselves we've been through a really, really tough and difficult time. And one of the ways to get out of it is to get back to normal and also to have really positive things to look forward to. So my party would be full of fabulous people, including lots of people like you, Stephen, colleagues from Care Talk and the Great British Care Awards, and also colleagues right across the sector, as well as friends. And it would be an opportunity to say, we are now through this. Let's look to the future rather than the past. And also let's have a bloody good party.
That sounds good to me, Martin. And of course, we talked about this again before we came on air. You get invited to endless dinners, endless award ceremonies. And it must come to the point where you think, I've got to put a tux on again. I've got to sit and eat chicken again. I've got to do the same thing. When you haven't done it for a while, you actually miss it.
Yeah, you do. And again, it goes back to that thing about missing the people. So every time I go to an event, I always meet really great people. And, you know, I think of so many fantastic evenings we've had at the Great British Care Awards, and they have been such amazing evenings because it's been an opportunity to celebrate the best in social care. It's also been an opportunity as well to let our hair down and to mix with one another. And I've met such fantastic people at those events, and they have been really greatly missed during this pandemic.
They really have. Now, finally, Martin, I've asked all the people I've had on the podcast so far, if you had a magic wand and you could have 3 wishes for social care, what would they be?
They'd be a long-term and sustainable funding. They would be recognition and reward for the staff and a sort of connection to the NHS. And they would be for a sector that is innovative and creative and doesn't stand still, but looks to the future and delivers more and more innovation, which is fit for purpose in the 21st century. And those would be my 3 big wishes. And I think if we could achieve them, we'd be in a very different space to the one we're in at the moment.
Without a doubt. I have to say, Martin, I know how busy you are. You're constantly in demand for interviews, for all kinds of things. So we so much appreciate your time this morning. It's been great to talk to you.
Well, I always love doing anything for Care Talk and also for the Great British Care Awards. And, you know, you do some fantastic work, all of you. So I'm really delighted to have this conversation. And it's always great to see you, Steve.
Likewise, Martin. And I look forward to sharing a vino with you at the conference at the Mermaid at the end of June.
Yeah, can't wait.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Professor Martin Green.
Our next guest will be announced very soon, so keep an eye on our social media. A reminder that the link to nominate for the Social Care Top 30 is in the podcast description.